Dobar dan svima. Hello, everyone. I'm glad to see you all and thank you for your attention, time, and trust you have given us today. Thanks to the Institute of Philosophy and Social Theory for recognizing the importance of today's conversation, and especially thanks to the Digital Society Lab within which we organize today's panel. We have this panel with great speakers, professionals, and experts. It's Andrew McStay, professor at Bangor University, Lazar Dzamic, digital strategist and lecturer at Faculty of Media and Communications, and Ljubisa Bojic, research fellow and coordinator of Digital Society Lab at IFDT. My name is Simona, and today I will be the host of this talk and the panel moderator. So maybe to start with problematizing the question of what is really revolutionary in a digital revolution, but pointing to the connection between the media and power together with the political and economics context in the media regulation and deregulation. So the question to all is how advertisers use subtle but also direct techniques to influence our lives and all spheres of reality. Maybe to Ljubisa, Andrew, Lazar.
Well, I guess Andrew is someone who did this in terms of analysis of emotions. I would say that it's not so much about advertisers. For example, Cambridge Analytica is only a small piece of cake when compared to social media companies. Advertisers don't have so much influence over our lives as recommender algorithms do. These algorithms are run by tech companies that own search engines and social networking sites. The main goal for these companies is to prolong the time we use their content, as we shall be exposed to more ads, which will ultimately make more money to them. Other dimensions may be political ones, when tech companies interfere in elections for some reason, which actually happen. Take example of support that these companies traditionally give to Democratic Party in the US. There have been many examples of this. Instead of being neutral, they push algorithms to work for one side in the political arena. Whatever the motive, recommender algorithms are pretty powerful tools since they bear much more power than traditional media companies. These algorithms direct our attention, which is crucial. If we regulate them, the algorithms, or we do the same with advertisers, like introducing GDPR, which happened in the past, of course, the question remains how can we control this?
Yeah. Do you want to go next, Lazar?
I don't mind, or if you're keen, please feel free.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's interesting. You know, the first question was about what is it that's kind of revolutionary about digital, and I think it's quite useful to kind of go back to kind of first principles and think, you know, what actually is digital. And when we talk about digital, we're talking about binaries, we're talking about ones and zeros, electronic pulses on and off that's thereafter converted into information. And I think it's that conversion, isn't it, that I think is a special, that was the key change. So it becomes a question of kind of translatability and fungibility. So it's a bit like cash in a sense. You know, cash, you know, you could do all sorts with it. In a sense that once you've translated it into kind of that abstract form, it means you can do so much more with it. And that thereafter, I think, you know, takes you back into questions of, you know, before digital, even think back in terms of kind of cybernetics, because that's what cybernetics was all about. It wasn't about killer robots or anything like that. It was about the translation of kind of the physical body, physical form, as well as technologies into information that can be used, shaped, and I say manipulated, I don't mean necessarily in the Cambridge Analytica sense, but just put to work in some fashion. So I think, you know, given that this seems to be kind of a critically oriented conversation, the question then becomes, what is lost? So in that kind of process of translation to digital, and we'll get onto stuff about emotions, I'm sure, in a while, but I think that's the kind of question that I think has kind of occupied philosophers for some time, that in terms of as kind of the kind of question of kind of humanities and so on being translated into cybernetics, as kind of Heidegger would have argued, what is lost in the process? And maybe that's kind of a think point for, when we think about digital culture, digital society, what is lost in that process?
Yeah, I would, it resonated with me a lot, and just kind of a few kind of things on top of that. The phrase digital is quite interesting, actually. One of the first things that I faced when I joined Google some years ago was actually that they used the phrase post-digital. We live in the post-digital world. And for me, it was like, what do you mean by that? Like everything is digital. I said, well, exactly. We don't even need the word digital because it's our life, right? We spend about 70–80% of our waking time staring at some kind of a screen, whether professionally or privately, which means that our lives, daily lives, are mediated by and large through the screens. And we can't call it as something separate from our lives. It is our life, actually. So in that sense, kind of, I see the sense in the phrase post-digital, but certainly, as Andy mentioned, and Ljubisa as well, the technologies, digital technology have brought upon ourselves new ways, not new ways, the ways was old, but the new magnitude of how we can do things using those particular tools. In a way, for me, the whole debate is basically a sort of epistemological debate, right? In a way, whether these new technologies and the new approaches, and particularly algorithms and recommended systems, are broadening or limiting our world in a way. But as we know, epistemology very quickly turns into ontology, because the way how we perceive the world then drives us to either create things or kill things, right? They originate behaviors and institutions and ways of thinking, or they start attenuating them. So in that particular sense, Simona used that word power. It is construct is actually now being lived through algorithms and recommender systems. And for the first time in our history, we've got tools to do those kind of, as Andy rightly said, manipulations, not in a sort of malignant manipulation, but that we can simply play with reality and our perception of reality in ways that are much more faster, that are powered by much more data than ever before, much more agile, personalized, and automated than ever before. So we've got kind of a completely new ecosystem of levers that various actors can actually pull that we never had before in that particular shape, form, scale, and agility. And of course, it is a new moment in our civilization, our society, and of course that we should be kind of very carefully thinking and talking about it.
Thank you all for the answers and really good point of view. So maybe we should start to talk about some other things. And maybe the question for all of you was, how is emotional AI being used at the moment? Are we manipulated, because Lazar says something like that, without our knowledge, and what are examples of it? So maybe to see how data about emotion and human subjectivity as feeding it to recommender system, pointedly in marketing, for Lazar also, but in other applications too, maybe for Ljubisa and for Andrew.
Yeah. Shall I go first?
Yes, please.
I think it's your territory, really your territory. Yeah.
Yes, emotion, i.e. technology.
Yes, it is. But I do think, it's useful to think back to before post-digital and before digital, if you like, because I think, the wider media environment since, kind of the inception of mass media around kind of the 1880s onwards, we've always kind of lived and worked in an emotionalized environment. So I think we have to be kind of a little bit careful of kind of saying that everything has changed, everything is new. I think to an extent, there is a continuation from where we were before. And I think you can very reasonably argue, particularly given the interesting advertising on this call, that in terms of kind of working in a creative agency, the amount of emotional insight that takes place often on the back of kind of psychographic research and psychodynamic research, But in terms of kind of the sensitivity to emotion, in terms of targeting and kind of creative executions, yes, it might not always be datified, but it is still an optimization of emotion. It's still that kind of jargon that we use in relation to technology. So I think we have to be a little bit careful about kind of saying everything has changed, everything is new. But yeah, but in relation to kind of the impact of kind of emotional AI, some stuff has been here for quite a long time. So social media has to be the most obvious one. Facebook, for example, is, it's no coincidence that Mark Zuckerberg majored in both psychology and computer science, because that's what the Facebook platform is. Yes, it's an outcome of computer science, but ultimately, it's not quite a psychology experiment, but they have experimented with the platform. So I think in terms of kind of kind of emotional AI systems, these are here and they've been here for some time. And yeah, in terms of kind of the where next question, it's going on all sorts of places. I don't know if you want me to kind of get into kind of a long list of kind of applications and use cases of emotional AI. Maybe we'll get onto that in a bit, but I think in relation to recommender systems, I think Spotify is again especially interesting. Spotify has kind of long kind of targeted kind of by mood, emotion, passing that data and selling that data over to advertising agencies such as WPP, who thereafter have kind of used that data as well. But I think as Spotify kind of tips into being a biometrics organization, the kind of latest business plans, in essence, kind of to target by voice-based analytics in terms of not just kind of what the person says, but how they speak as well in relation to context, where they happen to be, who they happen to be with, and the types of environment they happen to be in. So emotion becomes kind of very contextually specific, but biometrically mediated. So I won't get into a long list of kind of use cases unless you want me to, but I think it's kind of fair to say that, yeah, emotion and emotion-based systems are certainly kind of on the rise, and some have been here for a while.
Thank you, Andy.
Thank you, Andy. I would like to say something about our research we did around emotions. It is well known that emotions can spread to others through emotion contagion, and people, making people experience the same emotions without being aware of that. So they're not aware about that fact that they were influenced by some social media post, etc. In one inquiry that we analyzed how news affected recipients on social media, and the question was, will the patterns such as emotions and some other psychological categories translate into posts of social media users that are unrelated to news itself? We discovered that mass media are hugely impactful to their followers on Twitter. Negative emotions from media cause appearance of negative effect in posts of their followers. According to findings, if media promote values such as socializing and family, this would reflect in posts of their followers. This part may be important because research inquiries connect family and social connections with happiness. Additionally, if media promotes work-related topics, which could inspire society members towards business, this might boost economy, which could be beneficial for society at large. Similar conclusion could be drawn for spirituality. If these kind of topics are exploited by mass media, this might help individuals understand their personal purposes, which might lead to subjective feelings of well-being. Exploitation of words related to touch, hearing, and sex in posts of mass media made a significant increase of these words in posts of their followers. So this is just an illustration of how different categories of words impact posts of those that follow us on Twitter or on any other social media. In another inquiry, we analyzed how much changing weather conditions impact posts of people in different countries. We found that taken as a set, the predictors, air temperature and humidity account for the significant percentages of the variance in post count for 9 countries. Post count is the number of posts. Preliminary results show that when we apply machine learning algorithm on available data, that humidity and temperature can predict post count, which is actually how much posts people publish online. Our findings show how deeply media contents affect us, especially when we're faced with the negative news. On the other hand, weather-related inquiry may have broad use in marketing by predicting when target groups are ready to receive marketing messages better based on changing weather. So this is just an illustration, and there have been many inquiries similar to these ones. And this is just illustration how these emotional patterns are actually used by machine learning algorithms and recommender systems. So it's not so much about the topics and things like that. It's more about these patterns that affect us, and we don't even know what's inside the black boxes, the algorithms that they do this kind of work.
I'm pretty sure Andy is going to comment on this, but you just reminded me, if you don't mind my jumping into this one. You just reminded me, Ljubisa, a few years ago, before actually, literally before Corona wave in the UK, I was in London judging some media awards for the Drum magazine, which is the leading marketing or predominantly advertising publication in the UK. And I was judging 2 categories, one of them the media category. And it was really interesting to observe some of the things that you've mentioned, because actually we realized the judging panel, like halfway through it, by reading literally half of the case studies of submissions, we realized that we actually can't judge it. And why? Because more than almost 2/3 of the submissions had the case study written in this particular way. Oh, actually what we got, various big media agencies, parts of WPP and Omnicom and kind of various other groups, usually big groups with lots of resources to spend on that. So each of them actually created an AI black box with fancy names, Alfred or whatever. And basically what they say is, oh, we actually got this enormous kind of number of data sources, clients data, sales data, weather patterns data, behavioral data, lots of different data sources. We put all of those data sources into the Alfred, and basically, look, 8,000% optimization on results. It was actually killing it from the response and effectiveness point of view, because it was optimizing on thousands and thousands of dimensions every single second. There was kind of thousands of different decisions and optimizations happening every single second with huge kind of results or optimization results. But it was impossible to judge it, because none of those algorithms, none of those principles for actually how the tools, how the black boxes work have been described, because it's proprietary, of course. And we simply decided we can't judge the category. You have to change the rules for the category, because this particular way, how it's set up at the moment, it's impossible to judge it. So we know that this is happening a lot, and lots of brands and organizations are doing exactly those kind of things. They're tapping into big data, right? They're kind of combining different sorts of data in order to get media placement and also messaging optimization, not just the media placement optimization. So this is happening all without any knowledge of the consumers. We actually don't know which particular data and data sets are being used for those kind of things. Not necessarily dark practices, not necessarily anything illegal. It's just that nobody knows. And I think I would revert back to Andy would remember probably when we were talking, when I was writing my last book, he contributed to it as well. And it was the question, one key word that he used in that interview, it's the question of control. Who has control over what is actually happening? Who can really see it and being able to judge, okay, guys, now we probably kind of pushed a little bit too far. We are going into territories that maybe are not socially as defensible as we like to believe. The problem is that we do not have the visibility of many of those things. And I know that the Digital Services Act, the forthcoming Digital Services Act, is kind of trying to a little bit, very, very lightly kind of touch upon that particular territory, probably not enough or not as much as it should be. But that question of control, I believe, is the essential to everything. Who actually has the control over what is going on? Is that the regulators? Is that the state? Is that the brands or the companies themselves? And where are the consumers there? Because according to some estimates, our personal data, data is, by the way, the fastest growing commodity, traded commodity in the world. And our personal data is worth about 8% of the European GDP. What do we have from that as consumers? And also, do we have any control over that resource? I think that kind of boils down. If we can go into the nitty-gritty of how it works. But for me, it's actually who actually has the last word about what should be done, what is being done.
Yeah, thank you. Very interesting, because we see some data for all of us. It's a good point for marketing, for communications, but also for social science. But what do you think now? Where are things going? What are the challenges in emotional IE? Because we have a lot of problems or challenges in marketing, communications, advertising, PR, and etc. So can we envision the future today about algorithm, technology, techniques, and advertisers also? Maybe for Andrew, then Lazar, Ljubisa.
Yeah, I mean, I think just to slightly just kind of pick up on kind of some of the last comments then, and kind of last thread of discussion. I think it's quite important not to mistake the expression for the emotion. I think, so for example, in terms of kind of social media and the Facebook mood study, which I think Ljubisa will be kind of drawing on there, it's quite a different thing in terms of what a person is internally feeling, experiencing, and where they are as kind of a human subject compared to what they do on social media. I kind of slightly push back there, but I think the second question in terms of kind of where things are going, I think that kind of links with kind of Lazar's point about control as well. Because I think particularly in relation to advertising and marketing, it becomes interesting because advertisers and marketers are not the AI experts. They don't know how the black box works. They don't know, even if they kind of were unable to kind of lift the bonnet, they don't know what they're looking at. And I think it's a really interesting question is who actually understands what is going on under the bonnet? Who can actually track all the weightings across a neural network? And the answer is not even the engineers can do that. Yep. So you kind of have that kind of input-output thing where it's like, okay, we know what we're putting in, and we know we get stuff out of that neural network. But in terms of how something is kind of weighted and trained, yeah, that's much harder. And when it comes to the training of these systems itself, study after study we've done, most people don't understand where the training data comes from. So that kind of takes you to kind of into kind of questions of bias, and unreliable inferences, often kind of weighted against at-risk populations. Yeah. But in terms of the kind of where things are going, can you envision the future? I think the question that you sent over, it was kind of tended towards kind of the dystopian in terms of are we all going to be under control of intelligent algorithms? And I think the short answer is no. I'm a little bit kind of more optimistic about this kind of stuff. And, if we are under control of kind of media environments, then we kind of have been for a long time, for the last 100, 150 years. We came out okay. I don't think we're doing too badly. So I think there's lots of problems going on in the world in relation to kind of AI and so on. Actually, perhaps mostly in relation to carbon and kind of environmental concerns. But in terms of this idea of kind of technological determinism and that we're going to be ruled by the AI overlords and the algorithmic overlords, I'm a little bit more optimistic. I think as well, this moment as well as to why we can be optimistic, but I'll leave the policy stuff for a moment to let others speak.
Thank you, Andrew. Lazar, Ljubisa, what do you think?
Yeah, let me just very quickly. I think we do have. I'm going with Andy, but with a little bit of qualification. I'll have to say maybe I'm a pessimist by nature, so probably that's why. I think we got two forks in the road. One is the big brother, and another one is, to quote one of the Economist articles, lots of little brothers who are actually helping us in real life with understanding what we need at the time, at that particular moment, how we feel at that particular moment as well. let's say if you're trying to give up smoking, and I've done those programs in the UK before, we used more than 100 text messages. But they weren't contextual, but they were based on cravings. And if somebody texts us craving, that we start sending text messages to actually help them. But now with intelligent chatbots and really kind of powerful machine learning systems, you can be even more contextual, more personal in helping people. And that's kind of an example of the little brothers helping us understanding our moods and states at the time. And then you got China, for example, with the whole of the big brotherish situation, actually using the big data and machine learning and artificial intelligence for population control. So it can go both ways, and it's going to be the choice that we make collectively and individually, of course, for people in power, which particular way to go, whether they actually are working towards the social, constructive social aims, or maybe their own political aims. So certainly we're going to have these kind of two choices in the future. In the Western world, I am with Andy. I think that we are going to be going more into the little brothers scenario than the big brother scenario. Remains to be seen. But I'm not sure that every society on earth is going to follow that path. I think that there's going to be actors who are really going to kind of go the other side as well. So that's for me the future one. As for the future, later on we can also talk about some of the use cases where both of those things can play up, and then also what we're going to do about it regulation-wise. Is there a way for us to actually approach this field?
Thank you, Lazar. As for me, I would like to highlight that we are certain that polarization of societies around the globe is happening under the influence of recommender algorithms. Echo chambers are also created around important social issues, and certain amount of individual violent acts and protests have been kept happening because of these algorithms that make extremists out of ordinary people. Surprisingly, fake news sound very realistic to many members of society. At the heart of this issue is actually increasing addictions, I would guess. Our research shows that light and mild addictions may account for declining democratic capacity in society because people become easy targets for manipulation. What happens is that nobody notices this kind of addictions. They're usually aware, people are usually aware of extreme cases of gamers that don't sleep for days. However, members of mass society are usually light addicts of many material stuff. So when this adds up, it makes these functional members of society. And the new digital technologies are actually mimicking the direct reality, and they become a very attractive substitute for the direct reality. That is why I guess the addictions are growing, because our use of media and smartphones is increasing. And these smartphones also have touch and vibrations, and they are becoming very attractive. They are slowly becoming virtual reality. And the intentions for the future about having a chip inside our brains to send some thoughts to other people may be a reality, because everyone will be, we will like this idea, and we would feel left out if we don't have these chips in our brains. So there is no need for vaccination to get something inside us. We are going to want that. So I guess that is our road of humanity towards this kind of collective life, which is something like a dystopia, in my view. I don't know if you agree. I guess Andy doesn't, but that's how I see the world in terms of progressing addictions as underlying issue, because people that are addicts. They easily, go to be hooligans and make some crazy stuff and polarize, and don't speak to friends and neighbors and things like that. And algorithms actually do this to us. And as you all said, we are not under control of algorithms, and engineers are not under control of algorithms. They don't control algorithms. I'm sorry for the mistake. They don't control algorithms. We don't have any kind of control. And actually, AI is performing a very high influence right now because of these recommender systems, which are at the heart of every social media, at the heart of Google and other search platforms. That's how I see, where society is going. And in the next slot, I would like to share something about you in terms of regulation and what may be, small things we can do for the future.
Yes, maybe that's the next question. Maybe what are the best solutions now for the future? Because Ljubisa said something like Syria Black Mirror. When you speak about chips and other things, I have that sense about Black Mirror episodes and other films or movies. So what are the best solutions for the future? Are humanities going to be put under control of AI, or what the next steps for us, like a society?
Well, we certainly can't say that, but certainly can't say that at the moment. But instead of speculating, I think that a very useful discussion here would be, and I'm really keen to hear Andy on that one. Andy has, as far as I know, has created the world's first ethical framework for AI. And I think it was a really good start to actually talk about it. What does that actually mean? And Andy, if you don't mind, sorry, I'm asking a question of you to actually take us through your framework. It is specially created to actually mitigate some of kind of worst potential consequences of using this particular technology. What does it entail? What was your approach when you created it?
Yeah, I wish I had it in front of me.
You're like me, yeah? I have to remember, yeah.
I think in the broad sense, it wasn't necessarily aimed at the CEOs of corporations. It was aimed at kind of people who are designing systems. So it's very much kind of aimed at kind of engineers and designers to think a little bit about kind of what they're doing and why they're doing it, and with what implication and for whom. And so it kind of included kind of factors, kind of the usual things and kind of privacy, consent, all those kind of things. But we're really interested in kind of the psychological dimensions. Yeah. When we talk about emotion, it's not just a privacy issue. It's also about kind of how we interact with our devices and our environment. So that could be chatbots, it could be recommender systems, or it could be things that we kind of meet in kind of day-to-day life. And so I think there was we kind of really looking to kind of go a little bit further than the law, which focuses on data protection and kind of personal data and sensitive data, to think about more kind of the interactional kind of side of all this, and to think about what it would be like to live with kind of new forms of kind of human-computer interfaces. So yes, in terms of kind of that checklist itself, really it was kind of just a kind of really simple way for kind of designers, senior designers for that matter, who are kind of running teams, to kind of think about kind of what they're doing, and not just to think about kind of hard ethics, which is kind of things like law, governance, regulation, but soft ethics, whether is this the right thing to do? Is this as something as an organization that we want to be doing? So it was kind of, it's this kind of self-regulatory thing, which certainly kind of has its hopefully we'll speak to the cultures of organizations. And I'm glad you mentioned, because it really has been kind of quite warmly received. We're looking at kind of revising and redrafting. We came out now about kind of 3-4 years ago. There's scope for a refresh, but yeah, it's been downloaded and quite widely cited. So yeah, it kind of got a lot more traction than we were expecting.
No, because it's a very hot issue. So picking up on that kind of thing that you said, for me, a big part of the problem is actually that we are not having a debate about what sort of analysis, based on the data that we've got and all the kind of inputs that we've got, what kind of analysis is actually too much? And that's been kind of bugging me for the last few years, simply because from the marketing side, which is my side, more than the academic side, more and more in the last years of my kind of professional deployment, before I left the industry, was actually asking questions. We could do certain things, but whether we should do them. It wasn't kind of so much a question whether you could do something or whether you can do something, or literally whether you should do it. And for me, one of the kind of key spaces here was the analysis spaces. Is the ocean profiling based on, let's say, 3,000 to 5,000 data points that we may have about a particular person? And if you look at the transactional history, it could be even more than that. Whether the ocean profiling is too much or not. Because deploying kind of these new, for the first time, because we do have the power to actually do it, computing power as well, can tremendously improve the results and the effectiveness of the marketing exercises. And not just communications, but everything you do. How do you design the interface itself? How do you design the incentive architecture and the incentive structures in order to get somebody deeper into your world and everything else? So whether that's actually too much or not, at the moment, we almost kind of do not have a debate on that one. Which particular lines of analysis would be a little bit too much in particular context? That is completely, as far as I know, almost completely left to the commercial companies, the organizations, the brands, the clients to actually make the decision on it. And I think this is one of the weakest, or maybe the least addressed spaces in the overall debates, particularly regulatory debates at the moment.
I guess the regulators are getting these ideas and reacting very slowly. And it's a late reaction, and things change, and then they have to, make additional regulations and things like that. So they are not up to the task that they should do. One of possible solutions is making all recommender systems transparent public resources with the respect of profit motive for the companies that run them. That would involve presence of a certain amount of alternative content as opposed to the similar pieces of content consumed by similar people, as it's the case right now. It would be important to initiate digital literacy courses throughout education system. This should include the youngest as well, the university students. So this digital literacy, should help all generations understand what we are faced with, because any kind of people, even the oldest, the youngest, all aspects of society were not really ready for what we are facing. We're facing with AI algorithms and that are very successful in what they do to keep us engaged, to keep us receive these ads, and the collateral damage is these protests and the things that they make, extremize societies, etc. But we don't know anything about that in terms that people have neglected this psychological side of these issues. We have been neglecting this as a society. Also, some international organization, in my view, for example, the UN or some other organization, should measure global levels of media addiction. We all need to recognize these issues, such as directing attention and social psychology, as crucial. This has been neglected so far. For example, the question how negative news affects people, such as negative news in mainstream media, this hasn't been the focus, as the control over this powerful mechanism of priming was in hands of conventional power structures, mass media, and governments. Now we have a much powerful mechanism than all mass media together, and that is the recommender algorithms. The question is whether the tech companies are willing to let the societies get transparency around recommender algorithms and allow their regulation so that they both fit the society and the profit motive of these companies. So we had to cover these two pillars, but I don't think the tech companies will allow the societies get intrude into their world of algorithms.
Thank you all. Thank you really for a good point of view and good answers of all questions. Maybe we now have time for the audience question. If everything want to share something with us or have some question for our speakers. Maybe someone.
And while we're waiting, maybe Andy can comment on. Yeah, I'm slightly jumping up and down in my chair here. I just really want to push back on this point that that regulation in this area is weak. I would argue the absolute opposite. There's Council of Europe have come out really heavily against emotion recognition. The proposed AI Act, which is going to be the sister piece of legislation for the General Data Protection Regulation, has emotion recognition in the first article. The UNCRC, which is the kind of United Convention on the Rights of the Child, again, the recent update to that flags emotion recognition and digital addiction. European Data Protection Supervisor is coming out really hard on biometrics in public spaces, including emotion as well. FTC in the US are making really kind of quite left-wing hires in terms of to really kind of rein in the power of tech companies. And even China, I don't know what they're going to do about their road kind of surveillance enterprise, but in terms of commercial business, the government are coming down really hard. So yeah, I think emotion regulation is going to be really heavily regulated. But sorry.
Okay, Andy did some valuable contribution in that sense by writing about this, and he made these kind of calls in his book to make this happen, and it started happening at some point. I guess it's the near future, right? Thanks to you and other people that made it so out loud. They talked about this.
Thank you. Yeah, for sure.
Thank you, Ljubisa, for this.
But do you agree, Andy, that it's not so much about advertising as it is about tech companies, as it is about the big players? How can we regulate them? Can we be successful at doing that? Mm-hmm. Is that possible?
I think the European Union has a pretty good. It's a really difficult one. I mean, I think the answer is yes, it can. And I think the European Union has quite a good history of doing so. So I don't think it's the case that tech companies will have everything their way, but it is a constant battle. And I think it's important. It's kind of neither all bleak, it's neither all good. I think it's more multidimensional than that. So, but it's an ongoing battle. I think that's probably the best way to put it.
Can I jump in very quickly on this one? I was really kind of intrigued by some of the debates around the Article 29 of the forthcoming Digital Services Act. And it was kind of really good debate by several kind of NGO actors or academics on that one, because the Article 29 was specifically dealing with recommended systems. And there were some brilliant ideas. So we are not lacking ideas. It remains to be seen actually how much of that is going to really filter into the legislation. But some of the people, for example, said, which is completely going to kill the business model of Facebook and Google, to separate hosting of data from the curation of data, which means that now recommended algorithms are not going to be proprietary just by Facebook, but actually we may have several, 5, 10, 20 on the Facebook platform. And we choose whichever ones we actually want to use, not using Facebook's as a default, for example. So that was kind of one interesting proposition. Another one is transparency, that actually black boxes shouldn't stay black boxes for much longer, but there's some sort of an exposure, how they actually work should be given to, let's say, academics who can, in regular intervals, actually check how the recommended systems work, whether they are biased in particular ways and in what particular ways they're biased, and then actually sending back recommendations both to the legislators and to tech companies what to do about it. So again, I don't think we're really lacking ideas. It remains to be seen how that perennial battle between the profit and protecting my profit and my IP, proprietary knowledge, actually plays versus the kind of broader social interest and regulation. I think that's a space to watch.
Bravo, that's really good points for the end of the discussion.
Yes.
We would really love to hear if someone else has some questions for the people here. Maybe because people are deteriorated because of these, professional terms, and but we would, please feel free to ask questions.
Yes, if you have some questions, please, or write or say, whatever.
Over here, don't be surprised, Andy. Over here, people are usually reluctant to ask questions for whatever reason. So don't think the debate was bad.
Maybe put something in the chat if you don't want to kind of speak on the call.
Yeah.
Okay, thank you all for the great conversation.
Oh, sorry, there is one.
There's
sorry.
one, yes.
I spotted it.
Yes, in chat. Cool. Just to see.
Can you see it?
Yes. Just to see for who can give an answer.
Okay, so do you
think you can read
it out loud, yeah, so that everybody can hear it.
The society regulated the oil sector, the tobacco industry, automotive, etc. But we could measure their ill effects independently with algos. We don't have the data, it's internal, not even. The backend teams now actually how their data is processed. How do we regulate that? If we have some data about one industry, but it's internal data, what we can use for the other people, society, and the country also.
Yeah, I think it's interesting. The AI Act that's going through the Commission at the moment, likely not to arrive for at least for kind of 2-3 years, but it talks in terms of safety marks. So in terms of in terms of kind of AI systems to be put on the European market, they will come with need for a safety certificate. So it's not quite the same as kind of tobacco, but perhaps a little bit closer to automotive, in that the idea is that for any system deemed to be of high risk, such as emotion, or certain use cases of emotion profiling, that will kind of need to be kind of come with a kind of a safety certificate. So that basically means that a company would have to apply and have it licensed before they can use it. So I think it kind of seems to be moving in the direction that May is suggesting. But the point is taken in terms of problems of opacity and transparency.
Thank you, Maya. I agree with Andy that it's a complicated matter, but we're optimists as are we?
Thank you.
Okay.
Do we have any more question, comment, or point of view?
I would just say for all the viewers, all the people who are on the call now, just to kind of check out what Ljubisa and Andy are doing, because there's lots of interesting work happening at the moment. And whoever's interested in, particularly in the ethics of the AI, and it has particularly lots of things, interesting things to show. So that would be my recommendation for today.
Thank you, Lazar. Okay, I really hope that we will have the opportunity to continue this discussion, maybe live or offline soon. Thank you for all for today. Thank you, Lazar. Thank you, Andrew. Thank you, Ljubisa, to be with me and with our audience today. I think we have another time to see each other and have or continue our discussion. Thank you all and see you next time.
Thank you, Simona.
Yeah, thank you, Simona, and thank you, Ljubisa, for organizing.
Thank you.
Cheers, all.
Keep in touch. Goodbye, all.